Welcome to Robinson Hall at the Mahaney Arts Center. A reminder to turn off your cell phone, even if you think you've already done so. As a courtesy to the performers and to the audience around you, please no texting during the event. Please note the location of the emergency exits at the back of the hall where you came in and on both sides of the stage. Enjoy the performance.
Good evening. What did I do? My name's Will Nash. I am the director of the program in American Studies here at Middlebury and also the teacher of the guitar in American culture. And tonight's performance happens with the support of the Department of Music and the program in American Studies. Before I tell you a little bit about our distinguished guest, I want to say a particular word of thanks to Mark Christensen, the wizard of tech here in the CFA, and a special appreciation to Anne Chabot, who did the logistics to make all of this happen. When I first put together or really started dreamscaping my Guitar in American Culture class, which is running for the second time now, I knew that it was going to be really important to have a concert of some sort, because reading about guitars, looking at pictures of guitars, listening to recorded music, those are all great things. Those are things I really, really enjoy doing. My students can tell you that if you doubt. But being in the room for performance by someone who is just a master of the instrument takes everything to a whole other level. And so I knew we had to have a concert, and the first person who came to mind was Paul. Many years ago, I taught a first-year seminar on the blues and sort of authenticity in the blues, and Paul very kindly did an evening for just my class. And these students came in first semester in college and sat down, and Paul started talking, and they were beginning to settle down, but then Paul started playing. And the magic happened, and one of them leaned over to me and said, "I can't believe this is school." You know. So this is what we do at Middlebury. I know the magic is going to happen tonight, and I quickly want to get to that, but I want to tell you a few things about Paul Asbell, if some of you in the crowd are not familiar with him. The other way that I knew him before I came to Middlebury was when I was a graduate student studying the blues. Some of the records that I listened to that were critically important to me, Paul played on. There's a Muddy Waters album called Fathers and Sons, where we have Muddy Waters, sort of the dean of Chicago blues, in a way passing the torch, and Paul played rhythm guitar on that record. That record was produced by a man who also produced an album you may or may not have heard of called the London Howlin' Wolf Sessions. And the recordings in London were great, but they needed some of that secret Chicago sauce when they got back, and Paul provided some of that. So if you listen to those albums, you hear him doing one of the many things that he does so well. He has had a career playing with the likes of Paul Butterfield and top shelf jazz musicians in a band called Kilimanjaro that he founded, and then he brought Big Joe Burrell into another act of his career, backing him with the Unknown Blues Band. But just to give you a few other names of people that Paul has played with over the course of his career: Otis Rush, Magic Sam, Lightnin' Hopkins, B.B. King, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, Joshua Redman, Betty Carter, Bobby McFerrin, Trey Anastasio. maybe you heard of him. Paul actually taught him before he played with him. And then David Bromberg, who is just one of those people. You just kind of can't believe that you know David Bromberg. Paul is, in a word, a musician's musician. For a lot of people, that connotes not just high regard that professionals have for his work, but sometimes people think that that's someone who's so cerebral, so sort of in his own head, that the playing will leave you cold. That part does not apply to Paul. Paul, if I would say it in the sort of the most technical terms, in addition to staggering amounts of talents, he has heaps and heaps of soul. If you've heard it before, you know what I'm talking about. If you are hearing him for the first time, you're about to learn. Please help me welcome to the stage my friend, Mr. Paul Asbell.
Wow. All right. Guess I got to show up here for that introduction. Thank you, Will. It's such a night, you know it's such a night, sweet confusion under the moonlight. Whoa, yeah, it's such a night, you know it's such a night, we'll steal away, the time is right. No, I couldn't believe my ears, and my heart just skipped a beat when you said take you walking down the street. You came here with my best friend Jim. Now here I am trying to steal you away from him. Whoa, but if I don't do it, somebody else will. 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 It's such a night. Your eyes caught mine at a glance. Yeah, and you let me know this was my chance. Well, you came here with my best friend Jim. Now here I am trying to steal you away from him. Whoa, but if I don't do it, somebody else will. If I don't do it, somebody else will. And I don't do it, somebody else will. If I don't do it, you know somebody else will. You know somebody else will. Such a night. Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, here I am in every guitarist's fantasy, surrounded by guitars. And I'm going to try to play them all before we're done tonight. One of the things that I've always thought, completely independent of Will's course, and which is one of the reasons why I'm delighted he asked me to sort of be part of it, is that, you know, guitars are tools to make music, and there's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing. Which came first, the tool to make the music or the music itself? A lot of times guitars were invented or designed or created to fill a niche, you know, that was needed. But also, when somebody would make a certain type of guitar, all of a sudden guitarists were able to say, wait, I can do this. You know, Jimi Hendrix and the wah-wah pedal, or any number of things where you can imagine that, you know, there was a really nice collision of the technology of a new kind of guitar and a new kind of music. And each one of these guitars I think of as being a certain kind of music gets played on them. So I'm going to try to demonstrate that tonight, and it'll be a little bit dizzying, and there might be some whiplash as we go from style to style, but I think you can handle it. I'm going to play a tune. That was a tune, by the way, by a guy named Mac Rebennack that many people probably know as Dr. John. It might be one of the newer songs I'm going to play tonight because a lot of the stuff is old that I play. And this tune was actually written in 1910 and has been done by all kinds of people. You'll probably recognize it by people who are much more recent than that. But it dates back to 1910, and it's called Fishin' Blues. said you're going fishing all the time. Well, I'm a going fishing too. Bet your life your sweet wife will catch more fish than you. Well, any fish bite if you got good bait. Here's a little something I would like to relate. Any fish bite if you got good bait. Well, I'm going fishing. Yes, I'm going fishing, and you can come fishing too. Well, I went down to the fishing hole. Babe, I brought myself a pole and line. I hooked on to a night-pound catfish, brought him home for supper time. Well, any fish bite if you got good bait. Here's a little something I would like to relate. Any fish bite if you got good bait. Well, I'm going fishing. Yes, I'm going fishing, and you can come fishing too. Thank you. So this kind of guitar is a flat top guitar, and it's called that because it has a flat top, and I'll explain why that's important in a minute. But it's not entirely different than guitars that were made in 1700 in Europe. And the guy that designed this kind of guitar was one of a number of people in the Martin family who were actually Germans that came over and built guitars that really are sort of the paragon of what flat top guitars are to this very present day. And so in some respects, a flat top guitar much like this, possibly with nylon strings, was actually really the very first guitar that was. But then, almost exactly 100 years ago, 100 years ago this year, a guy named Lloyd Loar kind of thought, you know, violins and cellos and upright basses and mandolins, they all basically have this certain kind of construction that is actually what's called archtop or arched top construction. And one of the things that does is it sort of pushes out the sound a bit more through what are typically F-holes. This one doesn't have it. And jazz guys basically quickly gravitated to that kind of guitar. And so now when you see a jazz person playing, you typically see them playing an archtop guitar. Once 1923 happened and Lloyd Loar, I think he patented it, but it was originally done for Gibson. And Gibson archtop guitars are kind of really well known. You've seen many, many of them played by all kinds of people, blues people, but especially jazz people. At any rate, this is one of those type of archtop guitars. I'm going to be playing some of the kind of stuff that you would hear a jazz player play on it. There we go. Thank you. I should have probably said this earlier, but this isn't really, in my mind, a formal like lecture concert or whatever. So if people have questions as I'm playing these guitars about, or playing the songs I'm playing, you want to raise your hand and ask them, I'm game. Just letting you know. So if anybody's curious about something, feel free to pipe up. So I think we're going to get back to more stuff like this, but let's keep moving through the world of kind of guitar history. What's that? Oh, was the song? Yeah, good question. It was called Gee Baby, Ain't I Good to You? And it was written by a guy named Don Redman, and it dates back from the 1920s and 30s, kind of the jazz era. So now, around 5 years later than that, oh, by the way, and I should have mentioned that in 1923, when he designed that archtop type guitar that, again, most jazz guys use to this day, the idea of electric guitar was not a thing. So these were all acoustic guitars. And, you know, both the flat top that I originally played and then the arch tops that were designed, they were designed to be acoustic guitars because, I mean, how are you going to electrify a guitar? And, you know, people have since figured out how to do that. But at the time, that didn't really exist. So a guy named John Dopiera developed something that he thought might help guitarists to achieve, you know, the thing that they most want to do in life, which is be as loud as possible. And if you know a guitarist, you know what I'm talking about. And but you know, what are you going to do? They're electric guitars weren't invented. It was, what would that be anyway? But this guy, John Dopiera, thought, you know, if you built like this metal resonator in kind of like almost like a pie plate, if you open this up, you would see sort of like a pie plate cone sort of inside here. And if you did that and then you put the bridge of the, you know, where the strings go over on top of it, that should be able to amplify the sound of this guitar. So you would basically would be shooting, you know, I don't know if anybody remembers the Maxell ads from back in the 70s when guys sitting in the chair and like his speakers are pushing his hair back, you know. And at any rate, that's what's sitting in front of a National steel guitar or even a wooden guitar like this is like. This is a National. If you've ever heard the expression National guitar, you know what that's what this is. So at any rate, people started making music that was a lot louder because they could. And I think John Dopiera had in mind the idea that a guy would play in a big band and be able to be almost as loud as the trumpet player, which otherwise would have been impossible. That was his vision. He didn't realize that in 1929 there would be this enormous depression, and all of a sudden nobody could afford nice instruments. And what wound up happening is that the guys who wound up with this invention of John Dopiera's were blues guys playing on the street. And so most people associate the sound of this type of guitar, the general association is with people playing kind of bluesy stuff, which couldn't have been farther from his mind when he designed it, which probably goes to show that you never know really what your kind of, you know, where your invention will go actually. But at any rate, this sound that you're hearing is the kind of thing that we now associate with what people play on National guitar. I'm going to play a couple of, here's a tune actually from the 30s. Tune is called You Can't Get That Stuff No More. across town. Police came and they closed him down. Now you can't get that stuff no more. No matter how you try, you can't buy, you can't get that stuff no more. Little Suzanne used to sell hair grease. Now she's wanted by the cheaper police. Now you can't. Now you can't. No matter how you try, you can't buy, you can't get that stuff no more. Look here. Well, there goes Joe with a great big knife. Somebody been messing around with his wife. Now you can't. Now you can't. No matter how you try, you can't buy, you can't get that stuff no more. Yeah, well, uh-huh. Can't get that stuff no more. Yeah.
Are those usually played in a different tuning?
Yeah, well, not always, but I am. And that's an interesting point. I tend to kind of grab another guitar, go into a whole different world of another tuning and forget to talk about it. But yeah, this is a tuning that's called D tuning because that is a D chord. And you know, what chord is it when you normally have a flat top guitar? Or, you know, and the answer is, well, that isn't the chord. I don't know if you can really hear that, but that's not a chord. It's, you know, you make chords by fingering chords, but this is not usually a chord. So in some respects, it's extremely easy to play, you know, a guitar in open tuning. You can kind of go. That is actually kind of music, and yet I'm really not doing very much. On the other hand, trying to do other stuff, it's really like learning a whole new instrument. All of the chords you think you know, C chord, whoa, that's not a C chord. None of those chords that you have learned to finger make any sense in this other tuning. So in a lot of ways, it's almost like a banjo or something. It's a whole new other instrument that just happens to have 6 strings. So it's confusing sometimes going back and forth.
So one more question.
Yeah.
What's the link? How is it that poor black blues musicians ended up with that guitar?
Well, I wasn't there. But this was about 40 years before I was born. But you know, but that said, I have sort of an idea, and I'll try not to be too boring about it, but in 1927 was the very first time that guitars like this with this pie play, this resonator, was built into it. Again, John Dopiera's idea. And he actually had a vision of a guitar. This was one of his designs, a single cone. But he didn't like that. It sounded too raspy, sounded too kind of crude and primitive and, kind of like a garbage can that you're banging on. It was not the musical instrument that he envisioned. He wanted a design that he came up with later, a tri-cone with a cone here and 2 cones here. That was what he wanted as his, design. And he got National Guitar to make this design, and a number of guys played it. And then the Depression happened, as I think I mentioned, and nobody could afford this tricone. It was just, but on the other hand, the idea of having a lot of these guitars are built out of steel, unlike mine. And so therefore, you can do almost anything to it and won't destroy it. It's an indestructible instrument that also can serve as a self-defense weapon when somebody's come up to you on the street or whatever. And so it really is kind of perfect for a guy playing, in a crowded street corner or playing in a fish fry in Mississippi where kind of drunk people are kind of stumbling into you and stuff. And so anyway, that was the tricone. The trouble is, once the Depression happened, nobody could afford this much fancier thing called a tricone. So National basically kind of double-crossed John Dopiera, and the single cone design that he didn't like and made them promise not to release, they said, look, what are we going to do? Nobody's buying the tricones. We have to do it. And he was very annoyed about it, apparently, but hey. So at any rate, most people have these single cone things, and they weren't cheap. This isn't a cheap guitar, and they weren't cheap then, but they were fairly indestructible, and they allowed you to be able to play on the street or in all kinds of situations. So guitarists like Booker White and Son House, and these are probably names that many of you have just maybe seen on a record jacket, or maybe not. But these are the people who kind of made the sound famous. And more recently, Mark Knopfler did a record called Brothers in Arms, and there was famously a National steel guitar on the cover and a photograph, and people said, what the hell is that? And it kind of gave new life to this design. But anyway, I don't know. Much more information you probably are at all interested in, but guitarists are interested in this kind of stuff. I'm going to do an original tune of my own in which I kind of use the sound of this guitar, but sort of in a different way. you. Thank you. That tune is called Atchafalaya. It's a hard word to pronounce. I'm lucky when I get it out 2 out of 3 times. It's an area in Louisiana, kind of a swampy area, the Atchafalaya Basin, and there's a lot of people who live back there that are probably thoroughly off the grid and don't register with the census and hunt alligators and basically live like in the way that, you know, unfettered, free, and at least they used to. And there's still people who really do that. And anyway, that song evoked a vibe for me of a place that I've been a number of times, and so I called it Atchafalaya. And it's actually on a CD of mine, which I'll be happy to chat with you about. But let's see, I think maybe, yeah. Well, once the guitar was electrified, there was a whole bunch of things that blues guys in Chicago did with it. And I'm going to do an example or two of some things like that. Yeah.
Where might someone find these CDs you mentioned?
Gee, I don't know. Actually, you know, I'm glad you asked, Mark, because they actually are right out front once we're done here. And I'll be at that table, and I'll be delighted to talk to you about them. Thanks for asking. Well, there's still debate, believe it or not, 80 years later or something like that, as like which one was, who was the first electric guitarist who recorded, but basically it would have been in the 1930s. And actually, this is a part of the answer, what I have here, because this guitar is a flat top guitar. It's just like the one, it's not just like, but it's basically like the one that I played at first. But this is a retrofit pickup. If you're guitar nerdy as I am, and maybe 2 or 3 people in here may also be, it's a de-Armand pickup that was sold in the 40s and 50s. And this was a way to make an acoustic guitar electrified. Now, it isn't really an electric guitar, that is, and we'll talk about that. And, that's a devoted, dedicated electric guitar, if you get what I mean, when everybody in the world has seen what they look like. But this was sort of that, how do you get a guitar to be louder, thing that every guitarist wants. And one way would be to take your basic, normal, flat-top guitar and put a pickup like this in. And this is sort of what people like, for example, Elmore James, who is a Chicago blues guy, was a Chicago blues guy. It's also how Muddy Waters and tons of people who started out in the 50s had come from the South to Chicago, realized that, I can't just be playing on my back porch with an acoustic guitar and have people hear me. There are these bars that I'm playing on the South Side, which happen to be where I'm from, and they're loud. And nobody can hear you if you have an acoustic guitar. So the interim solution, in retrospect, was to put a pickup like this. And so if you take a look at a guy like Elmore James, pictures of him, I'm gonna do one of his songs, you're gonna see something that looks a lot like this, with a pickup stuck in the sound hole. Elmore James didn't have to do is deal with quite as complicated electronics as we do now. There we go. Look on yonder's wall, hammer down my walking cane. Look on yonder's wall, hammer down my walking cane. Yeah, I got myself another woman, and baby, yonder come your man. Your man went to the war, I know that it was rough. I don't know how many killed, I believe it was enough. Look on yonder's wall, hammer down my walking cane. Yeah, I know you don't love me, and baby, yonder come your man. Look at it. That's what I'm talking about. Right. Take all my money, walk the streets all night, look on yonder's wall, I hammer down my walking cane. Yeah, I got myself another woman, and baby, yonder come your man. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, you have to imagine this music with a band. And my band ran off right before the gig, and so it's just me. So, but at any rate, this was band, and that kind of fits in with that thought about like electrifying the guitar, because as soon as you have other people playing behind you, drums, for example, there's no way that an acoustic guitar without the pickup would, be heard. And also, let me just sort of say that, hey, could you kill the mic just for a second? Obviously. Does everybody hear that there's like distortion on that sound? And that's deliberate. It wasn't originally deliberate because that was just the result of guys playing their guitars like louder than the amplifiers were designed to do. And at first, engineers were horrified, and anybody who, this was not a, quote, desirable sound. This was a long time ago. We have completely changed as a music-consuming public on the desirability of what, whether you want to actually hear this sound. There we go. There's like a whole lot of sort of distortion that's in there. And it is basically has come to be a certain amount of the sound of what blues playing is. And, it just sort of got, but again, it was sort of an accident. It was an accident by guys basically playing acoustic guitars with pickups into amplifiers that weren't beefy enough to be able to render the sound of the acoustic guitar without distortion. And then it got to be a thing. So I'm actually going to play an electric guitar. Well, maybe I'll do it now. So I'm going to play a totally electric guitar right now, and just you can get a sense of kind of what became of that idea of having where a guitar gets amplified and no longer really sounds like what a flat top guitar sounds like. All right, just 1 second here. All right. Pardon me? What kind of guitar? Well, it's made by a guy named Don Grosh. So I guess you'd call it a Grosh. But somebody would look and, in fact, as Mark did, my buddy Mark, earlier, and said something about your Telecaster. This isn't a Fender guitar, but Fender has gotten so identified with two models, Stratocasters and Telecasters, that a guitarist will say, oh, I really like the sound of your Tele, or I hate the sound of your Tele, or where'd you get your Tele, or hey, dude, you stole my Tele, or whatever. But they're talking about a certain configuration, and this is that, even though it sort of is different in a number of ways. So it's a Don Grosh Tele. Here we go. you. Thank you. Once again, I missed the band. So you sort of have to, in your own mind, supply the idea that there's a band. But a lot of what I'm playing here would often be called lead guitar. In other words, it's sort of more melodic when I'm kind of doing. I'm picturing in my head that there would be a rhythm guitar player underneath, and maybe a bass player and a keyboard player, drummer, but they aren't here. So, one of the things that's sort of interesting, you may notice that I have a pedal here, and it does different things at different times, but that's a relatively clean sound, if you know what I mean. I'm playing many, many notes in a chord, and you hear it relatively clean. When I put it all the way here, if I was to play the same, there's much, much more distortion on it. So what I tend to do, especially in a band, is I will use that sound. Let's see, yeah. That's how I would play what's called rhythm guitar, the kind of the chords that I would be playing in a blues song, for example. But then, if I was going to, the other end of the spectrum is, and I basically do that I programmed something so that it's not really louder, it's just much more sort of distorted and screamy, for lack of a better word. And so that's a little bit of the difference between what's called rhythm guitar, the clean kind of chords, and lead guitar, which sort of, guitarists have always wanted to sound sort of like horns. And that idea of the resonator guitar, the national guitar that I played earlier, was really, like I say, designed so that guitarists could compete with trumpets, And lead guitar, in a lot of ways, the way that originally people sort of thought of it is that, oh yeah, I can be like the horn player. I can play one note. And kind of that one note would be strong and big, which you can't possibly do on an unamplified acoustic guitar. So guitar is morphed through electricity, if you know what I mean. Let's see.
Paul?
Yes.
I was thinking about how on that first guitar we could hear your fingers sliding
Yeah.
up and down and making sounds that a piano player doesn't really have to worry about making extra sound that isn't melodic or the chord.
Yeah.
How do you think about those sounds? Are you trying to minimize them, or are you loving it because it's part of the reality?
Well, boy, it's a really good question, and you can go off for a long, long time thinking about that, particularly because at the end of the day, you can maybe minimize it. You can kind of get strings that are flat wound strings that actually have less squeak to them. And so why don't you do that, Paul? And for me, the answer is because I actually really there's a brightness that the non-flat wounds, round wounds, have that I really want and I really like. But the squeaks come with it. Yeah, but a little squeak is fine, but how about a lot of squeak? Well, that's a really good point. When I'm in the studio sometimes, there'll be a take that I'll take, and it's kind of like, there was a squeak in there that really was like loud. It wasn't subtle, Paul. All right, maybe I should do that again. And it is something where, like everything else in life, if you have the right balance, it's fine. I don't mind some of it, but sometimes it's too much. Well, it's and then I totally get your point, and sometimes in the studio, you do have a little bit of that idea. For example, True Confessions, when somebody will do a take, when I'll do a take of a song, and everything was really good, but man, there was that one really loud squeak. It's possible to what's called punch in. In fact, this is funny because I'm going to be doing a
right here on this very stage, another demonstration kind of performance, but with a very different point in mind in exactly 4 weeks on the 29th. And we're going to be talking about several recordings that I've made that, and kind of analyzing them and seeing how, breaking it down and seeing how that stuff was done, how the sausage was made, of actually making these recordings. And one of the things is that digital editing allows you to take that one little place where that squeak was just too much, but otherwise the take was really good. And you can kind of punch in and play that little piece again and record it. Yeah, but won't everybody know? No, not if you do it well enough. Maybe anybody who is familiar with Pro Tools knows what I'm talking about. And so, we're now in the world where I remember hiring a dear friend from college whose name is Joel Smirnoff, who basically became one of the world's greatest violinists. He was the first violinist in the Juilliard String Quartet by the time his career kind of culminated. And I asked him, he said, we should play together sometime. I don't play Beethoven. And, well, what? He said, no, I'd love to maybe track on one of your, songs. And we did that. I went to New York and we hired a studio and he came in and I had to Pro Tools a lot of his playing. True confessions, Joel isn't here, so it's okay. And I said, I hope it's okay. And he said, Paul, everybody does it. I said, even in your world? And he said, oh, yeah. I mean, when the Juilliard does a recording, oh, yeah, we do a lot of Pro Tools. Everybody does it now. And I was shocked, frankly. But if anybody knows the name Glenn Gould, you know that, in a sense, that fight was fought in the 50s. And Glenn Gould basically won long before Pro Tools, where the theory is really you're making a work of art. You're not confined by whether you're cheating or not to do it. And he won that battle, if you know what I mean. And so, yes, you can do it. And so, therefore, when you hear squeaks, to a certain extent, it's kind of like, well, no, I wanted them there. But let's see. Where were we? Democracy in action. Would anybody like to hear more of any one of these particular guitars? The second one. The resonator? I will do that. I just realized I'm going to do one more tune on the electric. Will anybody object if I play another tune on the electric? And then I'm going to do the resonator one, because I realized I want to get another sort of approach.
This type of electric guitar become
Yeah, good question. The Fender Telecaster was the first guitar that Leo Fender made, and it is still regarded as a classic that people are still very suspicious about any changes that you make to that original design that he released in 1951. And in fact, the very, very first Fender Telecaster wasn't really a Telecaster, it was called a Broadcaster. And Leo got sued because other companies, Gretsch in particular, had a model called the Broadcaster, which he didn't know about. So they basically had to kind of cut away the decal up here where it said Broadcaster. They could keep Fender there, but they had to cut away. So basically, they cut away the Broadcaster part, and those guitars now are extremely valuable, and they're called no-casters, because I actually had the cut-off thing. But then, he had to come up with another name. Broadcaster was kind of cool, but so television was this new thing, 1951. So Telecaster. And that was, I won't say it certainly wasn't the first electric guitar, but it was really when it became extremely mass market.
I'm interested in both microtones and overtones.
Ah,
And before you play
welcome to the club.
guitar song, I'm guessing overtones are easier on an electric.
Yeah.
Microtones and all the others.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, here, just in case somebody might not know what microtones mean, microtones basically here are the semitones that exist on virtually every instrument, including piano. And, well, what is between this note and this note? Well, nothing on a piano. Yeah, but on a guitar, and of course, all of a sudden, and how are you doing that? Well, I'm bending the string, which I did an awful lot when I was playing the bluesy kind of tune. And there is a instrument, a deeply human instrument, that does sounds like that. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, the human voice. It's arguable that every melodic instrument is trying to be a human voice somehow. So pianists, I'm sorry, you have a beautiful, beautiful, fantastic instrument, but you'll never be able to do that. It's just not built, it's, you know, whereas, and when I was using the slide, which I never really talked about actually, that's what sort of, that was all about, is to basically replicate the human voice. Anyway, here is a tune that's with a very different approach to the sort of the sound of you know, an electric guitar than the distorted kind of bluesy sound from before. And you can hear that's a very, very different sound that, you know, than the kind of distorted singy sound. I was actually going to point at the other guitar. It's the same guitar, duh. But which kind of brings up a point, which is with electric guitar, it's the guitar, yeah, but it's also the amp. And so the difference between a given sound when amplified this way or this way is kind of everything. And arguably, it may, you know, the subtleties of the guitar are probably nowhere near as important in a lot of ways as the subtleties of the amplification. So in other words, electric guitar really is the guitar and the amp. And there's more. But at any rate, that sort of has changed, you know, once the guitar got amplified and then turned into something really different than an acoustic guitar. So at any rate, I'm going to play another tune on the resonator. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, actually, yeah, very quickly here. This would be a good example. You may remember that I had mentioned that that this is, you know, the guitar that was invented in order to get guitars to be loud before there was electric guitars. So right now, you're hearing nothing but the sound of this acoustic in these mics. And now, yeah.
That was with zero amplification.
Yeah.
All the mics are muted.
Oh, okay. Well then, yeah, then that's maybe a good example. So that is the room and nothing else. And you heard it, right? Because it is kind of, so now, yeah, let's put the mics back to where they were. Duh, louder. But it's, you know, it's still an acoustic instrument being amplified by mics. And this is this guitar, in addition, being also all right, since I have you all here, let's do a preference test. Do you like it better entirely acoustically, this guitar? Or with some of what kind of the pickup? Without? Here's what I think about it. I know. I'm sort of torn too, and it depends on the situation, but one thing that I notice is the bass, that aspect is much more reproduced kind of by the pickup. You just sort of feel it in your gut, kind of. But on the other hand, the treble strings sound a little bit more natural when they're acoustic. I don't even know how much you kind of really hear that, but that's, you know, life's a trade-off. And that is exactly the type of trade-offs that a musician often deals with. Now, on the other hand, this is a fantastic room where really you could have a solo violin or whatever, you know, any acoustic instrument, and it is designed for zero amplification at all. But most rooms are not like that, let alone, you know, stadiums or whatever. So amplification is kind of a necessity.
You talked about the inventor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Designing it for a certain kind of music that was not
Yeah.
blues.
Right.
What was it?
Well, I'm in the tuning now, so I can't really replicate it, but the person definitely was thinking that, you know, kind of hard to actually play when, yeah. But the top two strings, that is what, you know, kind of, it doesn't sound like a trumpet, but basically you can sort of hear a little single string solo that guy could conceivably be surrounded by people who are all playing, and it would cut through. So I guess that would probably be the answer. I'm going to play one more tune that is popular demand on this resonator. And the tune actually is by a guy named Blind Blake, who recorded in 1927, and really was a guitar virtuoso When I say virtuoso, I don't mean like, well, he was really pretty good for a blues guy. No, I mean this guy's playing was just unbelievable for that time or this time. And people spend their entire life, as like me, trying to just play as anywhere near as good as Blind Blake did. So I'm gonna try. The tune's called Police Dog Blues. Well, all my life I've been a traveling man. Yeah, all my life I've been a traveling man. Living alone and doing the best I can. I'll ship my trunk down to Tennessee. Yeah, I ship my trunk down to Tennessee. It's hard to tell with a man like me. Look here. Yeah. I met a gal, couldn't get her off my mind. Yeah, I met a gal, couldn't get her off my mind. She passed me up saying she didn't like my kind. I met a gal, couldn't get her off my mind. Met a gal, couldn't get her off my mind. She passed me up saying she didn't like my kind. Well, I'm scared to bother round her house at night. Yeah, I'm scared to bother around her house at night. She got a police dog craving for a fight. His name is Rambler, and when he gets a chance, his name is Rambler, and when he gets a chance, he leaves his mark on everybody's pants. Well, I guess I'll travel, guess I'll let her be. Guess I travel, guess I let her be. Before she sicks that police dog on me. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to be out at the table out front, and I'll be glad to chat further about any and all of this stuff and maybe interest you in a CD. Thank you so much, and thank you, Mark Christensen, for being so helpful on the sound.